but I know everybody's very anxious to hear what Dr. Bruttomesso has to say about what a conductor does.
Well, good morning, and thank you all for being here. And do I talk loud enough?
No.
Yeah.
Louder? Thank you, Leslie and Pat, for putting this on and for asking me to speak. People always say, what does a conductor do? And you can go on YouTube and learn how to be a conductor in 3 easy lessons. It tells you with your right hand, you're going to conduct a waltz, you go down and then over 2 and 3. 1, 2, 3. That's so simple. And then your left hand, louder or softer, you know, more vibrato, whatever. Okay? Forget about it. that's not the important thing. So to understand what a conductor really does, you need to go back and find out what the composer does. The composer creates in his imagination, in his mind, music. And it's not just notes, it's emotion, history, story. It's all of humanity that's going into this piece of music that he creates in his mind. And then he has to write a score, little dots on a piece of paper that hopefully captures what's in his mind. Now the composer doesn't have an orchestra in his living room. He can't write it and then play it so I can hear how it sounds. He doesn't have that. He has to go from his head to the score, and if he's good, when an orchestra plays that back, it'll sound like what he had in his mind. So Mozart, for example, went off to Linz to give a concert, and he forgot his music. So he sat down in the library and wrote his 36th symphony, the Linz Symphony, in 3 days, just all perfect, you know, hardly any erasures. I mean, this is genius. Beethoven did a little tinkering at the piano. There's smudge marks on his, you know, and erasures and corrections. But just imagine how he was able to take the sound in his head, the music in his mind, and write a score so that it comes out to sound like Beethoven's Fifth, is what you hear. So he wrote, he said this symphony is supposed to be the uncertainty of life in the first movement, fate knocking at the door, and then it's going to finally end with a climax with human salvation. So how does he write a score like that? Well, the first movement starts off double forte, real loud, but it's only for strings, 2 oboes, and 2 clarinets. Fourth movement starts off double forte, real loud, the whole orchestra, a piccolo for the high end, a contrabassoon for the low end, 3 trombones in the middle to give it a little ooh-pa-pa, and what you hear is Beethoven's Fifth from his mind. He never heard it until it was performed. So, truly genius. So now what does the conductor do? The conductor reverses the process. He looks at the score and he tries to put it in his mind. He doesn't have an orchestra in his living room, so he's got to look at the score and try to create what he wants to the music, basically, not just the notes. How does he do that? Well, if it's a new piece of music and the composer's still alive, he can talk to him. When John Adams writes a new piece of music, they talk to John Adams. In fact, John Adams always goes to the rehearsals and gives guidance. What message do I want to give? What emotion do I want to give? And you can do that with a living composer. What if the composer's dead? Well, how do you talk to him? Well, in the past, the only thing people could do was to go to performances and hear the music. Now we have recordings, tape, records, now CDs, DVDs. You can go on YouTube and see anything. So you can get an idea. But those performances are not what the composer necessarily had in his mind. Those are those are performances of what those conductors had in mind. It's not the same thing. So many professional conductors will not listen to other people's performances. They don't want to be influenced or biased. So what do? They go become historians. They read about the climate, the political, religious, moral, philosophical climate of the times, how it might have affected the music. They can read what the composer himself wrote about it. For example, Beethoven's Eroica Symphony. If you just look at the score, it's E-flat major. So you know it's going to be heroic, right? Luke Skywalker and the Jedi Knights are coming to save Princess Leia in E-flat major. If he wanted it to be sad, he probably would have written it in B minor, like Tchaikovsky's Sixth Symphony, the Path of Thieves. So you can see some stuff just by looking at the score. But you don't have to guess. Beethoven actually wrote. It was supposed to be the rise, fall, rise again, and then redemption of a great man. And that man was Napoleon. Right? So in 1803, he wrote the Third Symphony dedicated to Napoleon, except that in 1805, Napoleon crowned himself emperor of the world. Beethoven was not happy. You've probably seen pictures of he erased the front page so hard that he ripped through the paper. He's so disgusted. So then it was changed to the rise and fall of the rise and fall and rise again of a great man. But he told you what he wants to sound like. Then you can get into some nitty-gritty. How fast should it go? The metronome wasn't invented until 1817. Beethoven didn't even use a metronome until 1823. So, how fast should you play it? You can read the critics, the newspaper reports. They went to the concert and they said, Herr Beethoven is trying our patience. He wrote a symphony almost twice as long as anything ever written before. It lasted an ungodly 53 minutes. That's right there in the newspapers. So, you can find out a lot by studying history. More ways than one. A story I always like to tell when it comes to knowing the history is the Leningrad Symphony, Shostakovich's Seventh. There was the Russian people in Leningrad were being starved to death with the German siege of Leningrad. Shostakovich wrote, he says in his notes, I wrote a symphony for the suffering and resilience and finally the triumph of the Russian people. He wrote the score. He was in London. They had to fly it to Leningrad and dodge the German anti-aircraft fire. The composer, the conductor rather, saw that it required 100 musicians, and most of the musicians were already dead, from frozen to death, starved to death, or so sick that they couldn't perform. He managed to gather 80 musicians together and finally perform it in April of 1942. The Germans required, for propaganda purposes, that the symphony be radio broadcast. When the German High Command heard that symphony, they said, we're going to lose. We can't possibly defeat a people who can have such resilience and such fortitude in the face of such adversity. So, it's emotional. So, no conductor in his right mind is going to conduct Shostakovich's Seventh Symphony without knowing all that. If it can affect the Germans that way, can you imagine the feeling of that piece of music? So I'm going to do an experiment. You're all going to become conductors. And then you're going to go and conduct the first two measures of Beethoven's Fifth, because we all know Beethoven's Fifth. Okay, so the score is simple. It's C minor, it's in 2/4 time, an eighth note gets a beat, I'll tell you what they did wrong. It's a conductor over there. Eighth note gets a B. Double forte we said real loud. And so it's rest, dot, dot, dot. And the second measure is a half note with a holdover, dash. Rest, dot, 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 dash. Those are the first two bars. That's the score. Is that what it sounds like? No. So, think in your mind, hear it, and while you're working on that, I'm going to show you some examples of what other conductors have done. Notice the closed eyes. He's in another world.
He has to know he's...
Staccato Clipper.
I think maybe conduct...
Okay. I'm sorry. This is George Sell.
And all of this while he keeps...
Okay, so that's what y'all heard? You know that?
No.
I mean, yeah, you didn't hear dash. Rest, dot, 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 dash. Of course not. So, how did they do it? Well, first thing the conductor has to do is have an orchestra and has to rehearse. So he's already said he's formed music in his head. He knows how it's supposed to sound. And he gets in front of the orchestra and he has to get them to play so that what he hears out there in the real world of senses, what he hears with his ears, matches what he has in his brain. Now, how does he do it? Well, first thing, he can tell them. He can talk to them. There's a funny story about Toscanini, his broken English. He tried to tell the NBC Symphony how he wanted the overture to Mendelssohn's Midsummer Night's Dream to go, and he couldn't explain it. So he got a piece of paper, and he ripped it up and made confetti, threw it in the air, and he said, "Play it like that." Okay? So they can explain, they can sing. They're a lousy singer usually, but they got their message across to kind of sing the music. You know, when you conduct a waltz, you don't go 1, 2, 3. You the whole body on. You'll see the conductor dancing up on his toes. The whole body motion. If you're conducting a chorus, you look at them and mouth the words and use your fingers a little bit more. It's more a more personal, delicate type of instruction. Their face and their eyes tells it all. You can see sadness, joy, terror. You can see everything in the eyes and in the face. And you go from extremes. You have Van Karajan conducting with his eyes closed, to Fritz Reiner, I call the original Darth Vader of music. If you look at Fritz Reiner in the eyes, you turn to a pillar of salt. And then you have someone like Riccardo Muti, who has so much expression in his face and his eyes. Everybody can YouTube Riccardo Muti conducting the overture to Cavaliera Rusticana. And you watch, you hear the music and you watch his face and eyes, then turn the sound off, and you could still hear the music in his face. That's how much emotion he can produce. You run into problems sometimes when you have a soloist. When the soloist is playing, he's the boss, or he or she is the boss. When the conductor's conducting, he or she is the boss. But the two of them have to have a little mind meld to get together how they want this piece to sound, or you got two pieces going on at the same time. And the most famous example of that was Leonard Bernstein and Glenn Gould doing the Brahms Piano Concerto No. 1. Well, Glenn Gould's tempos were so crazy but Leonard Bernstein had to concede to him, otherwise he couldn't do the piece. So Leonard Bernstein got up and publicly announced, "What you're about to hear is not my fault." So there's all of this. So it's not just the beat, you know. Sure, you have to keep them together, but all of those mannerisms, all of those, whatever it takes to get not just the notes. The musician, we've got a musician sitting right here. The musicians can sit down and play those notes. I don't want to say blindfolded, but, you know, one hand tied behind the back, whatever expression you want to use. Professional musicians can play the music, the notes, the score. It's a schematic. But the conductor and the musicians have to get on the same page mentally to try to have the same emotion and the same feeling for the piece. And that's where probably one of the hardest things to define is the conductor's personality. The conductor, they all have different personalities. If they work together long enough with an orchestra, it's almost like they're of one mind. There's a story about the Berlin Philharmonic being conducted by, or being rehearsed rather, by a guest conductor, and all of a sudden the sound of the orchestra changed. And the conductor was so taken aback, he stopped. And you notice some of the musicians were looking out into the auditorium, so he turned around, and there was Wilhelm Furtwängler walking in. Just the sight of Furtwängler, their sound changed. So that's, you know, you hear Ormandy in the Philadelphia sound, you hear, but there's personalities, they can almost read each other's minds. And luckily, because some of the conducting techniques, you'll see Furtwängler conduct. Nobody in their right mind can follow Furtwängler, but they do, and it's because of the personality. So let's see some examples.
The hard to convince orchestras and audiences.
Shostakovich Fifth.
Must watch. It's so free. It's got to be like one person singing is hard at it. And you're playing like an exercise.
I'll give you plenty of time.
Okay, now this is John Barbaroli. Talk about not being able to use your words. He speaks English, and this is the London Symphony. It's not a language barrier. But scherzos are usually frivolous and light and dance-like. Okay. And he wants them to play the scherzo movement from Bruckner's Seventh Symphony. He wants to play it so that it sounds ominous and portentous. But he doesn't use those words, so he gets very frustrated. I think it's funny, actually.
Now, remember, the great thing about it, if you start it really softly, it's got a tremendous sort of and the character. The great nervousness, soft, but something ominous and tremendous about it. And the B wants to be much shorter. It's all short, it's all got, they're all got the actions of it. It's got you get one bar right, you get the lot right. There's some long notes somewhere. It changes. It's the C that's too long. It's
Complaining about one note. The C is too long. I mean, come, get a life, guy. All right. So, fire.
There's only one way to rehearse an orchestral piece, which is what I do.
What's that?
I take either a Mozart symphony or a Charleston poem. I play the whole thing through, beginning to end without a stop. Oh, blessed thing. The orchestra makes a few mistakes, naturally. I play it through a second time. The orchestra makes no mistakes. I then just take a few little difficult parts. I pinpoint them. I emphasize them. I repeat those 3 or 4 times. I really perform.
So, completely different, right? Completely different. Now, how can he get away with that? Well, he's worked with the orchestra so long they know him. He can get up and perform. In England now, they're lucky if they get one rehearsal, so they have to be able to be sight readers. They also have to have a rapport with the conductor. Here is rehearsing.
By the bar.
Used to be anyway.
About 20 bar. Stops. Starts educating. Fancy educating for Everton.
Okay.
What does a young conductor do? Who will never profit by anybody else's experience, thanks to his unconquerable egotism and innate stupidity. He will take a first-class orchestra, after playing 20 bars he will stop, and he'll begin educating them. Fancy educating a body of people like the Lord of the Body Orchestra. They already know the damn piece, damn nine melodies. He goes on another 20 bars, stops, starts educating, teaching them. That's why he wants 6 rehearsals, and that's why I can do with 2.
It's all self-parody. And yet,
Okay, so what's funny is that Sir John Barbaroli and Sir Thomas Beecham were contemporaries. And you got him nitpicking over the C note, and you got him saying, hey, whatever. I'm just here to, don't shoot the messenger. Okay.
There were 2 Strasses as a conductor. The one,
How about conductors conducting their own music? Some conductors were really great. Regard Mahler was a great conductor, as well as, of course, a great composer. And I'm going to show you Richard Strauss conducting his own Eulenspiegel, and I'm going to put himself to sleep. This is George Sell describing how Okay, you got the idea. Anybody asleep? Otto Klemperer, let's see. No. I'm trying to find Otto Klemperer. Yes. We'll get there. Let's see.
A comment?
Sam?
A comment?
Excuse me? I'm sorry?
Oh, I have a comment. There was a movie from 50 years ago called Once More with Feeling. The conductor was played by Yul Brynner, and his wife was, I can't come up with her name right now, but there's one scene in it that was just wonderful. Absolutely wonderful, because he's working with the orchestra, and he has now taken 2 days, and he hasn't gotten past the first bar of the text.
Well, that's Toscanini. Brahms
Yes,
first.
probably based on him.
Yeah.
King
Toscanini spent more time rehearsing Brahms' First Symphony than it took Brahms to write it.
My point is, I didn't understand it when I saw that 50 years ago. I've just kind of put that together right now, so forgive me.
Okay, where's Otto Klemperer? We're going to get there. Be patient. There we go.
It's difficult to speak about this, but you see, he is very conciliating and very elegant and very mild, and I am not. And he's very romantic, very romantic. I'm not at all. And he is what we call, not.
So, we're talking about personality, right? He's not a romantic. So he says. So his Mahler is going to be different from Leonard Bernstein's Mahler. You saw him. Wow.
He's
The technical side of directing. The technical side of directing.
Bonnie, do you enjoy the conductor trying to tell you how to play your violin?
He's a violinist.
Okay. My favorite conductor of Brahms is, let's see, we're going to go to 52. Okay. My favorite conductor of Brahms is Wilhelm Furtwängler. I'm going to show you a little bit as conducting the Schubert Unfinished, and then we'll go to the Brahms, the end of the Fourth Symphony. The Fourth Symphony is just a E minor scale, 34 variations, and the genius of Brahms, that it's one of the most amazing pieces of music you can imagine. So let's see here. Find it for you. 52. Okay. So here's the Schubert Unfinished.
Crescendo ist in der Mitte des Taktes. Nicht schon am Anfang. Sowohl bei Ihnen als bei manchen zu früh. Das ist ganz, nicht so übertrieben stark. Das ist ganz das Melancholische.
More melancholy.
Normal. Mit der rechten Legato.
Okay, so he's telling him, play it more melancholy. How do you do that? I'm not a performer. way the musicians can make the music sound more melancholy, just by where they put that crescendo in the middle. Yeah, that's what he's talking about. Anyway, let's go to described as being a marionette or puppet. I mean, people used to say, how can the orchestra even know what he wants or what he's doing? But that's what he grounds there. Okay. Now, I was raised on Toscanini. Whoops. Sorry. I was raised on Toscanini, so until I got older and started studying other composers and so forth, other conductors and so forth, if you said Beethoven's Fifth, I heard the Toscanini version. Now I hear the Carlos Kleiber version. You know, I mean, Mahler, you hear the Bernstein, you know, so we're all influenced by what we hear. But Toscanini wasn't the most sympathetic or warm conductor, to say the least, but he was able to have such perfection. The musicians were the best in the world. Supported by RCA and the NBC Symphony, they had all the money in the world. They could hire the best musicians. He could rehearse as long as he wants. You know, he can take months to rehearse a piece if he felt like it. So what he was able to achieve was absolute technical perfection. And if you can do that, you can play things faster and make them more exciting. For example, you can't have a note without a rest without silence on either side. There's no sound without silence on either side. If you're going to play it faster, you have to make the note shorter and the silence shorter. Well, of course, the professional musicians can do that, right? Except if you got 80 of them, they have to all do it exactly together. You can't even a little bit off if it turns to mud. So what he's able to achieve was miraculous. With you'll see some of the playing. La Forza del Destino. I have to tell you that if you go up to, I went up to Marcello, I've talked to other conductors, and I say, why doesn't anybody play La Forza the way Toscanini used to? And they go, they imitate him. Everybody knows this piece, this performance. It's just Let's go to 124.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. There we go. Doesn't look very excited, does it? So, neither one of them show that much emotion.
Tip of electrical tip.
He's not a man of sentiment, it's a marvel.
Beethoven's Seventh. Don't let him look at you. He's got the Darth Vader stare.
Who is that?
Fritz Reiner.
Okay.
Fritz Reiner.
Thank you.
All I have to do is just look at you.
There you go. I was looking for that. I mean, I'd be there going this to the cello. You're supposed to be bringing in the... This is incredible. Okay, another really great conductor was George Snell. Let's see if I have it reversed here. There we
The
go.
milder way. But there were, of course, moments of heartbreak and moments of unpleasantness. But then, of course, you arrive very soon at the point, and this point is now very much to have the best of me.
Don't sustain a lump of sound, sustain a dotted half note with a pulse of each quarter inside it. Then you know when to go out. Once more.
Brahms' academic overture.
It's not like it has to be a little bit more sarcastic.
George Zeppelin.
Yesterday, West Arm there. Resolution, alive. Suspense. No crescendo. Suspense. Quick crescendo in. Più. Più.
ability to make the players go along with that rhythmical current.
Shostakovich Fifth. Okay, can I go a little longer?
Yes.
Yeah, we
Yes,
started.
everybody?
Yeah. We started late, so, there's a thing about conductors conducting music from their own country, and it does make a difference in many cases. You know, Czech conductors. Look at trying to compare Toscanini's attempt to conduct the original American premiere of Shostakovich's Seventh at about the same time that Mavrinsky did it in Russia. Well, Mavrinsky grew up with Toscanini, with Shostakovich. They were contemporaries. They were psychological bosom buddies. Who can have the better interpretation? So sometimes nationality does make a difference. I want to show a little bit of Harold Munch conducting some French music. Charles Munch conducted the Boston Symphony. When I was a kid, we used to drive to Tanglewood, hear the Boston Symphony, and it's quite amazing. So I'll show you a little bit of what a Frenchman does with French music. Oh, I'm sorry. Here we go. Pointing to his heart.
Bring them out in such a way and accentuate them.
This is the, you all probably have heard the Berlioz Symphony Fantastique. The description of the last movement when they take the hero to the gallows, whatever, to the gallows and chop his head off and everything, and lead him to the gallows. The orchestra said that when they played it with Charles Munch, they felt like they were being led to the gallows. I mean, that's how much emotion. And we'll get to Mavrinsky. Will be my final conductor. Mavrinsky, as I said, was contemporary with Shostakovich. His performances of Russian music, such as the Tchaikovsky symphonies. If you've ever heard Tchaikovsky's Fourth, conducted by Mavrinsky and the Leningrad Philharmonic, you cannot believe. Even Valery Gergiev, who does a good job, doesn't come close to Mavrinsky. And then I'll also show you his doing some Shostakovich. So let's see where we are here. 36. Oh, here we go. Okay.
To say Philharmonic Orchestra. It was a Mravinsky orchestra, and it was one of main attractions of the city for young musicians to join this orchestra. It was a dream. He was somebody who was beyond.
Tchaikovsky Fifth.
Само появление Боровинского в зале, сама фигура необыкновенности какой-то, я бы сказал, вот от руки говорит об очень многом.
Две симфонии занимают первое место. Пятая Шостакович, конечно. И вот это. Действительно много, очень много. И что всех стран, где я был, всегда приходилось мне как-то играть. И ее тоже.
Shostakovich Fifth. Facial expressions doesn't mean much.
Не точно, друзья мои, не точно. Еще разочек. Неужели нельзя зарядиться, как батарейка карманного фонарика, зарядиться на маленький кусочек времени ощущением со смысловыми приходами в удар. Опять этого ничего нет. И я не знаю, друзья мои, как специалисты должны помочь. Понимаете, это одно дело в концерте, это когда мы говорим вдохновением, это одно дело. Это чистенько надо сыграть, понимаете? Просто в сторону метра, что дальше делать? У них звук, у них колорит, а у нас это поступь. Пожалуйста, начало не сливается. Один, 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 один. Пожалуйста, энергично.
Did they get it? So they lived through Stalin together, right? I think he knows how it should sound, right? What's a conductor do?
A lot.
He tries to produce a sound out there in the real world, working with the orchestra, so that that music that you all hear is probably very close to, not exactly, but very close to what the composer had in his mind in the first place. Can you imagine trying to get into Shostakovich's mind and play it so that it sounds like he had in mind? And if they can do that, you go to the performance and you go, oh my God. That's when you're really blown away by a tremendous performance. You know they got it. Yes?
When there's a guest artist, does the conductor pretty much let the guest artist do what they want to do?
You mean a soloist or yes?
A soloist,
Yeah.
a soloist,
Yeah.
yes.
The soloist basically has to call the shots, set the tempos and so forth. Because if the conductor doesn't go along with him, you can't have Beethoven's Emperor Concerto with the conductor conducting it at one speed, and then the pianist is going to come in and play his solo twice as fast. Or in the case of Glenn Gould, twice as slow. So they have to work together. And being professional, they both kind of know how the piece should sound. But there's going to be quirks and things to iron out, and they do that in rehearsal. Yes?
Well, when you see Gustavo Dudamel start cueing the soloist, you know he's having a problem. Because I've seen him not cue the soloist at all. And with of all people, Yuja Wang was, I thought she was going to a fire. Her tempi were so sporadic. And he kept cueing her until she finally slowed down.
Yeah. Yeah, or the peaceful.
But she was not having her way.
There's other things to talk about. For example, why do some conductors use a score and others, I'd be looking at it and get lost. Others like it there and feel some inspiration at the very last minute. I mean, Charles Munch said he'd like to have the score there. All of a sudden you see, oh, I never knew that before. Start doing. So the musicians have to watch when the conductor all of a sudden gets a bright idea in his head that they didn't rehearse. So baton or no baton, you know, it's if you conduct this way, you know, that's a lot of work. And the baton with the wrist, the tip out there, you get the same amount of motion and a heck of a lot less energy. So Bernstein used to have a masseuse, but you can see why. Bernstein used to have a masseuse between an intermission and at the end because he would get muscle spasms from jumping around so much. Even Bruttomesso sprained his neck. I had to cancel it. I had to have an assistant conductor. He got a neck sprain in the middle of a performance and couldn't go on. Anyway, any other questions? Yeah.
When people are starting out and they're getting their training to become professional musicians, are they being trained at all on the techniques of these different conductors, or do they just have to kind of pick that up as they go?
It's a little of both. When you're in music school, you all have conducting courses, and whether there's sight reading and ear training and conduct, you know, so it's part of musical education. So professional musicians who go to Juilliard or wherever, when they come out, they've done some conducting, and usually composing too. Most music schools you do composing. Did I leave anything out?
You're doing fine.
Oh no. As far as music school, conducting, ear training, composing, and of course your instrument.
There was no real discussion about other conductors. Watching this is actually very informative. I've heard a lot of the stories and all, but they didn't come from class. But you know,
I should have pointed out that you can see everything on YouTube now, right? Okay. If you YouTube our Art of Great Conductors, you can see the whole 2-hour video on YouTube, free. I've just touched some highlights, but you can actually see the whole thing. Okay? Oh yes,
Stan, what do you know about the industry in general? Is it on the increase, or are conductors becoming more rare? What's the trend?
There are areas where countries like Finland and Estonia and of course England and the United States, they turn out a lot of conductors. You'll see conductors of major orchestras around the world, and many of them are young. It's like baseball. You're going to have the top, right, the $1 million players, and then there's a lot of other people who don't make it. So it's competitive, certainly. Anything else? Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, I'd like you to do a program like this on the more modern composers. You know, the ones that are still living.
Uh-huh.
Can you do that sometime?
Volume 2, that'll be our favorite company for next year.
Oh, you mean the living conductors or living composers?
Conductors.
Yeah.
That was one.
He made this talk for us. This is not something he just had laying around. He had to put this together for us, and I really appreciate it. I knew he had so much information in there that, you know, comes out in bits and pieces, so we got to sit down and really hear what we were up to there, Sam.
Yes, can I make a comment about
Sure.
Sam? Sam and I are on the selection committee for the new musical director. And what's that?
That was my next question.
Yes, we're on the selection committee, so we've had a chance to see all the conductors in rehearsal, and Sam and I have had some great discussions. I'm always so in awe of your expertise, Sam. And I get to ask him a lot of questions. Really, he's truly an expert in the field. But it's been such a pleasure to be involved in the selection process and to be able to report back to the league. I particularly have done that so that they can understand the process and what we're doing. And we're coming up on the home. We're coming up on that. It's coming soon. Yes.
Just a quick question. I don't know if you can answer this, but the orchestra in the West Symphony, are they going to be delighted to have one conductor finally, or have they enjoyed having guest conductors?
Well, I don't know if I can quite answer and speak for them, but I know that they're going to be happy to have their very own person. And we've been going through, it's a typically lengthy process, I have to say, in its defense, because a lot of people are getting very impatient when you say, Sam, about the process. They're getting impatient, but it's very, very customary that it take this long to go through. And we have, of course, the good fortune of being able to see each of the candidates conduct 2 concerts that are very different repertoires so that we can really look at their styles. And we go to the rehearsals and we have paperwork to fill out and we have to make comments, and it's been really interesting for me.
Yeah, 1 or 2 more to see.
Well, we actually just have 1 more.
Yeah.
We have 1 more to see, and that's going to come up in November, and that will be Fauzi Highmore.
Right.
Fauzi Highmore is one of our finalists.
How do you include the musicians in making that decision?
Oh, the musicians have a tremendous amount of influence.
Do you sit with them? Do you give them a survey?
They're
on the committee also.
They're on the committee. Yeah. They have feedback. They fill out paperwork. Really, they're a very big part of it. A very big part of it. So I didn't mean to dominate the discussion. I just wanted to make the point that Sam's really an expert in this area, and it's been a real privilege to have him on the
And I just want to remind you, we still have a few more pleasure companies left, and back on that last table there, there's